Hey everyone, you've got Nisha here from Daily Clout, and I'm here to give you your This Week in Congress update. We've got a lot to cover, so let's get started. So first up, we have a much anticipated drug pricing plan by House Speaker Nancy Pelosi, and she just unveiled this plan this last Thursday, and it aims to lower drug prices in America. So a little bit of background on the issue. Pharmaceutical companies will do research. They will come out with a new prescription drug that sometimes doesn't have any other market competition yet. There's no one else that is creating the same product that targets the same kind of treatment. So if they're the only ones that have the drug that you might need for your treatment, they can essentially charge whatever they want for it because there's no competition for it. And that can lead to very, very steep drug prices, especially in the United States. In fact, internationally, drug prices are significantly cheaper than they are in the United States for the exact same drug because, people will buy it in the United States. So what this bill specifically aims to do is negotiate annually the top 250 most expensive drugs on the market that don't have at least two competitors, and it would negotiate the prices set for those drugs. So again, it targets that it doesn't have at least two competitors because the idea is to get at those who are overpricing because there's no market competition. So how would these drugs be priced, right? What is the new metric to price these drugs if there's no competition for them? How can we assess what a fair price would be? Well, like I said, internationally, drug prices are significantly cheaper than the United States. So we can use those prices. In fact, they do. This proposal asks to use the International Price Index is what they call it, and it essentially evaluates the prices that people charge internationally and try to make a U.S. price more comparable to that. It's important to note that, again, this is not a mandate for a specific price for to sell a drug. It is a mandate to negotiate with the federal government, or it's a mandate for the federal government to negotiate with these 250 most expensive drugs companies. That said, because it's not an actual mandate, you can't tell somebody what to price for their products. That's not constitutional. It does, on the other hand, levy very steep fines, starting at 65% of gross sales of a given drug in this 250 most expensive drugs, on those drug companies if they refuse to engage in the negotiations. And it will also limit how much drug costs can go up. The proposal actually states, this is the language in the proposal, this steep escalating penalty creates a powerful financial incentive for drug manufacturers to negotiate and abide by the final price. The plan will also call for reinvesting taxpayer money that would be saved from these negotiations and reinvesting it back into drug research at the National Institutes of Health. There isn't anything that has actually come out that would that gives numbers about how much they expect to save on these negotiations yet. But that is, this is a proposal. This is things that will be in the works later on. Another thing that this proposal adds is it includes a $2,000 out-of-pocket cap on prescription drugs for Medicare beneficiaries and the disabled. Also, the negotiations for these drug prices are not limited to those who have Medicare buying these drugs. This is a new drug price negotiated for all purchasers. So the committees people are very eager to see the actual legislation itself. The committees are expected to take up this legislation maybe as soon as next week, and the goal at the very least is to pass it out of the House by the end of the year. And recall, there are only 34 legislative days left in 2019. So some of the issues around this bill is really around the number 250. People who view this bill or this proposal in a more liberal light are looking to have at least 250 of the most expensive drugs negotiated, their prices negotiated, but they want to see many, many more because the top 250 drugs, anything below that is still sometimes can be ridiculously expensive. So they would like to see the bill to be to cover more drugs across these pharmaceutical companies. On the other hand, those who view this proposal in a more conservative light want the opposite. They want a perhaps maximum of 250, but would like to see even fewer on the table here. That said, though, President Trump, surprisingly, has actually gotten behind this bill. He praised it. In fact, I have a tweet here. He says, "I like Senator Grassley's drug pricing bill very much," and he says, "and it's great to see Speaker Pelosi's bill today." He says, "Let's get it done in a bipartisan way." So this bill has actually gotten support from President Trump at this point, which is a good thing in terms of passing, in terms of its passability, right? We'll talk about this a little bit more in a second when we talk about background checks, but it seems to be the general overarching mood, per se, in Congress is that Republicans are hesitant to sign their names on anything unless they're positive that the president is going to support it and won't eventually just veto it if they decide to pass it, because they're trying to avoid tensions with the White House. Another thing that President Trump actually said is he said, "Why should other nations like Canada, why should other nations pay much less than us? They take advantage of the system for a very long time, or they've taken advantage of the system for a very long time, pharma." And this is something that Trump said in July. So this is an issue that he has been vocal about and wants to see something done about. So in terms of where this bill kind of falls in its passability, it's a little bit less liberal than I think a lot of liberals would look for, but it's also a little bit less conservative than the conservatives would look for. So it falls a little bit more on the moderate side, which actually could make it significantly more passable than anything else. So it's by far the most sweeping bill on the table right now. So it'll be really interesting to see where this goes soon, especially because this is an issue that even the president has backed right now. So that's all there is about this bill that I can say for now. But we'll move on to background checks. So this one is a little bit of a mystery. There is a leaked background check bill that is circulating the Hill, and nobody has taken responsibility for it yet. So we don't actually know who came up with this, but I guess let's talk a little bit about what it says, because I think that's probably the most important part here. So it would expand background checks to all commercial sales and create an entity to perform them. That said, it is not a universal background check bill and does not support that idea. And while it is considered to be a step in the right direction, it is still expanding background checks. A lot of those who view this in a more this issue in a more liberal light, like Pelosi and Chuck Schumer, they have responded to this by saying that anything short of universal background check bills or universal background checks isn't going to be good enough. Those who view this in a more conservative light, mainly a lot of the Republican Party, have declined to share their opinion on the bill yet because they are waiting for President Trump's approval. Again, we have this idea that there is hesitation to sign their names onto anything that the president might just eventually veto. The president has not yet said one way or the other. In fact, some of the language here is kind of interesting. I'll read it to you of some of these interviews that they've done. Senator Chuck Grassley from Iowa says, "You don't need to worry about what's floating around. We aren't going to do anything that the president isn't going to sign anyway." So again, we have that same idea. Similarly, Senator Ted Young from Indiana, when he was first asked whether Trump would publicly, if he would endorse it, he says, "Once the president does, I'll look forward to reviewing it." So again, we have that language that's expressing hesitation to support a bill that they're not sure their president is going to get behind. And it would be sort of a waste of their political capital, right? Why fight so hard for something, negotiate it all out if it's just going to get vetoed anyways? So if the president hasn't yet expressed an opinion on this, who else can we look to see where this plan might be headed, right? The first person we can look to is the Attorney General, because the way this works is the Attorney General will give a recommendation first, and that recommendation is a good sort of data point to see where this bill is going to end up going. So the Attorney General, when he was asked about this plan, responded he very much downplayed it, so it's very unlikely that he will give a positive recommendation for it. Another key player to keep in mind would, of course, be the NRA, and they do not support expanded background checks. They instead claim that the main issue is the mental health care system, and that should be the main focus, not expanding background checks. The bottom line is they say that this isn't actually about guns and people getting access to the guns. It is about the mental health issue, and they're, of course, referring to a lot of the mass shooters out there. Some Republican representatives seem to be getting antsy about a potential bill and not really knowing where they're supposed to stand on one, but also wanting to see something get to the floor for a vote. And Suzanne Collins said that her preference would be that we bring the bill to the Senate floor before recess. So that is where we stand on this this expanded background check plan that, again, nobody has claimed yet. So we'll see who actually whose baby is this bill actually. Lastly, let's talk about Kavanaugh and this potential impeachment disaster. Really, the New York Times story. There was a New York Times story over the weekend that reported new allegations of sexual misconduct against Justice Kavanaugh from his time as a student at Yale. And the House Judiciary Committee says that they are too tied up with impeaching the president to take immediate action on a political investigation into Brett Kavanaugh. So that is at the very least what Committee Chairman Jerry Nadler said this last week on Monday. He says, and I quote, "We have our hands full with impeaching the president right now, and that's going to take up our limited resources and time for a while," he said on WNYC when pressed by, I suppose the host was Brian Lerner. Nadler did say, though, that his first move to investigate Kavanaugh was going to come next month when FBI Director Christopher Wray appears for previously scheduled hearings that will now feature a significant focus on the Supreme Court justice's past and whether, and this is really the key about the Kavanaugh impeachment, or the impeachment process, is the main question is whether the FBI background check was thorough enough. Nadler said that his panel's primary focus was going to be whether Kavanaugh actually lied to the Senate. He says, and I quote, "These deeds that allegedly he did years ago would be very relevant to a senator voting for or against his nomination." So the question is, how did these stories not get discovered by the FBI? How did he become a justice without any of this stuff resurfacing from beforehand? At the time of Kavanaugh's background check, before he was officially a Supreme Court justice, Nadler had apparently complained that the Senate only got a fraction of Kavanaugh's record from the time that he worked at the White House, which was from 2001 to 2006. He served there, just a refresher, he served there in the White House's counsel's office and later as a staff secretary. Nadler apparently said that it was urgent that they receive that because of the potential for Kavanaugh to rule on policy matters that may have come up during his time in the White House. So there had been this press for gathering this information. They didn't have enough of it, so the question is, how did this slip through the cracks? Well, again, they're not going to actually address these allegations until later on because they are very busy with President Trump's impeachment matters. At the same time, these are some troubling questions that are coming up about sort of the process of becoming a Supreme Court justice. So more on that when it comes up. So that's just about all that I have for you today. We covered Nancy Pelosi's drug pricing plan. We covered the expanded background checks plan that was leaked mysteriously. And we covered the Kavanaugh impeachment issues. So if you liked this video, please like it right here. Subscribe to our channel. Go check out our website, dailyclout.io, not .com, .io. And leave us a comment. We love to hear from you. If there's anything specific you want us to follow up on or investigate, let us know. We would love to do that for you. You tell us what you want to see. And I hope you have a wonderful rest of your weekend, and I'll look forward to seeing you guys again soon. Okay, have a good one. Bye.